All right. Well, it's a pleasure to have both Dr. Moody and Dr. Silvera for the first interview for the Black Male Professors and Researchers Collective Initiative, also known as BMPRC. And before I continue, I'll give both of my colleagues here a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into a few questions and discussions about what it's like to be a Black male professor at University of Alabama specifically, and talk about the journey for how you both reached where you are now. So, Dr. Moody, I'll start with you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Myles Moody, assistant professor here at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in the Department of Sociology. Primarily, I study racial disparities in health, more specifically racism and how it impacts the health of Black adults in the United States, and even more specifically, racism-related stress and how that impacts mental health outcomes among Black folks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moody. Now, Dr. Silvera.
Hey, great. Thank you for having me. Jeff Silvera, I'm assistant professor of health services administration in the School of Health Professions. Freshly at University of Alabama, Birmingham. I was just at Auburn University down the street. And so I'm actually coming in still from Auburn, about 2 hours south. Mainly I study chief executive officers or senior leaders and the impact on patient experiences. And then I've also started to delve into diversity and inclusion initiatives, mostly in local government context, but I'm excited to start thinking about how to apply that in the healthcare context. And so, Myles, it's great to meet you, and I think there's great opportunities for us to potentially collaborate. So thanks again, Donaldson, for bringing us together.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And I'll just, again, introduce myself. My name is Donaldson Conserve. I'm the founder for the BMPRC initiative with my board members who are located at different institutions. And I'm currently an associate professor at George Washington University in the School of Public Health, where I've been working since October of 2020. And I would like just to start by the fact that you both are at the same university. You don't know each other until this interview session, and how this is such an exciting opportunity, because one of our goals for the BMPRC initiative is to connect Black male professors who are at the same institution or at different institutions. So this is a great opportunity to have both of you who are fairly new at your institutions together. So perhaps I could start by asking, how does it feel to be at UAB, even though you haven't been there that long, or transitioning to the position, especially for you, Dr. Moody? You shared that you just you transitioned into the faculty position straight out of graduate school. So perhaps you could share a little bit about your journey to the school where you are now, and how you feel to have your first tenure-track assistant professor at University of Alabama at Birmingham.
No, thank you for that question. A broad range of emotions and experiences, because like you said, coming, straight out of grad school to an assistant professor position, it can be daunting. You spent your whole life as a student, well, presumably, at least that's what I did. I know some folks, go to grad school a little bit later in life, but for me, I spent my entire life as a student, and then a few months later, I'm expected to be, the head of a classroom, of 100 students. But it's also really, really exciting. It's something that I've always, or at least for the past 10 years of my life, seen myself being able to do. So to finally be here is super exciting. I really wanted to be at UAB. So that contributed to my excitement. But not only did I have that transition, but it's during a pandemic, and particularly something that the world hadn't really experienced like this. So many, parts were moving, and so many things were uncertain, all while trying to stay safe and, keep my my loved ones safe, or at least, pray that they stay safe, as things were moving. I was moving to a different state, that where I didn't know a lot of people, which was exciting, but, it can also give you a little bit of anxiety. But through it all, I'm glad that I was able to come here. It's been a great first year. Looking forward to the second year, and just taking it day by day.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your response, Dr. Moody. I'll come back with some follow-up questions. But now let's switch to Dr. Silvera, who's also, joining UAB at Birmingham. So how does it feel? Your situation is a bit different, of course. You were already an assistant professor who received tenure at another university, and now you're coming to University of Alabama, Birmingham. So please tell me, how do you feel?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I want to speak a little bit to what Myles is bringing up about the show lights of being in the front of the classroom and how, self-aware you can become. So most of my teaching here at Auburn is, it's primarily people from the state of Alabama. So it's probably a similar student demographic, except that I feel like the way that at Auburn, the major was set up, it was mostly high achieving undergraduate students. So I'm not sure what difference that might make. And I'm curious to see about that. Because of the way it was like an apply-in major. And so there was the potential in most of my classes where I might have been the first Black male teacher they've ever had, and potentially the first Black person they had a real conversation with. Because my classes are very conversational. It's health policy stuff. So we're talking about all the things you're not supposed to talk about at dinner, like religion, preference, all of these things, politics that you're not supposed to talk about. We get, immediately into those topics. And so, and I actually found it invigorating that both of those things. So both being potentially the first Black person they've really had a conversation with and gotten to know really well. And then being a Black male professor that they might not ever get that opportunity again. Both of those didn't put any pressure on me, but I did feel like both of those lived in the classroom. And so like the conversations, I think I can't ignore the fact that those were part of the conversations. If I played music at the beginning of class or anything I did to get to be authentically myself teaching that class was going to have more of a reverberation on them, going forward. And for my experience, it's always been very positive. And so, yeah, I mean, I think being Black, being male, being young, which is something we tend not to think about, are all, I don't know if they're all net positives, but they're net positives to me. Like, if I'm being authentically myself in the classroom, those are all great things to bring to the class. So I'm sort of in the middle of a transition right now. So I started June 1, we're shooting this June 16. So like I'm 2 weeks into my job at UAB. And already there are some cultural differences. So Auburn is a predominantly white university, as is UAB, but Auburn is much more of a traditional university, which has only been my experience at Penn State, at Florida. It's all been large state-run universities. And I think UAB is a little bit more of a city campus. Certainly, I mean, it's in the middle of Birmingham. And so the student demographic, I'm already excited to see in the fall. I haven't seen it yet, but is a little bit different. So you have your traditional students, what we call traditional students, and then more commuters, lifelong learners. You have a lot more people who are taking classes as they go and still working, a lot more people who are maybe switching careers. And so I'm excited to see how that changes the dynamics in the classroom. And like, frankly, potentially it's the first time that I have students, not the first, I've had here or there students who are actually older than me, but this is a potential for people who have like actual full careers and they have real opinions on things based on experiences and not just stuff they see on TV or hear from their parents. And so I'm excited to see how that goes. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did actually. You did more than answer the question, and you shared information that now I'm interested to, follow up on. One of them is I could not help to think about the fact that talking about being the first Black male person professor that they may have, the students at Auburn University may have had, and I could not help to think about, how well, and also to clarify, were there any Black students in the classroom? right? Or was this, was it not a mixed classroom, or most of your classes, how have they been at Auburn? Just to also.
There definitely were, but minorities in general, and frankly, even males in my classrooms were pretty rare. So it was primarily white, primarily female. I'd say in every class out of about 35 didn't fit those categories. So they were a minority of some status, or they were male, or yeah. I mean, primarily it was female, young females in my classroom. So young white females.
Okay. And so the question I have, especially given what Dr. Moody just mentioned, is being, being in the classroom all of a sudden from being a student. I'm curious to know, given that you have had more experience teaching now after being at Auburn University, what may have helped you to prepare for that role, before stepping into the role of being a Black male professor? And also, if you don't mind sharing about the dynamics within your department, are there other Black male faculty or Black faculty in general, or minority, faculty in general, and how the transition was for you at Auburn in general, successes and challenges and so forth.
So I'm trying to figure out where to start. I was not the only Black person in my department. There was a Black junior professor or junior assistant professor along with me, Black female, who was a couple years ahead of me. There was a Black male who had since retired. So there had been Black males in my department, but actually when I came, he had already retired. So like I saw him at the interview, but not when I started. And then there was like a Black postdoc that came through while I was there, Black male postdoc. I guess the big things that I have, and this, my experience at Auburn was very positive. Lots of support, both with my program and in the department in general. It was always very clear what the expectations were for tenure. That's less clear now. I mean, it was abundantly clear. It was like, do this and you will get tenure. And so there was very little debate about, politics or if people like you. It was like, just, if you do this, this is what tenure. The bar was very clear. And that's not the case in most places outside. That was a very rare situation. But in general, like everyone, and I had this conversation with Donaldson a little earlier, maybe last week. It was clear to me at every step, if they hired you, they want you to get tenure. If you get tenure, they want you to, go for full. Like there was no sense that anybody was hired with any sort of like ulterior motives or anything. Like everyone wanted you to be supported at every level. Likewise for the students, if they say you're ready to sit for comps, they want you to pass comps. They feel like you're ready and can pass comps. Likewise for your dissertation, all through those processes. And so I think as much as there is a pressure cooker across all of academia that we need to talk about and maybe discuss how we let these systems persist, both in our person and in how we interact with people. Every one of those systems, for most people, are really supportive systems. I want you to get here because in order to get here, you got to be able to show you can do this. And so it's a systematic progression. But yeah, I mean, I felt supported at every step.
Okay, great. So then the support you received, you felt that it helped you in the classroom, navigating the classroom, or was there a prior experience you had before coming to Auburn University that allowed you to navigate the space of being maybe the only Black male person the students have interacted with? And also, did you have to teach the first semester that you came, or did you wait until second semester?
Yeah, I did teach the first semester I came, and actually
you hit the ground running.
Take this as supportive or not supportive. I was very quickly given the reins over the course, so it's like, make this your own. And so I took that on fully and said, okay, if it's going to be my course, we're going to be doing this. It's less lecture, more activities. There was teaching workshops that I attended through the first couple of years to help learn new activities and build, like just a skill set around teaching. And I loved it from the first day, but I had never taught in grad school.
Okay.
And so like the first day of class, I was just like, this is cool. Like we're having a conversation. I know what it's like to be, to Myles's point, when you're a lifelong student, I know what it's like to be that student. And so if I just try and teach as if I was there, but then the skills you learn are like, okay, not everybody learns the way I learn. So let me try and add this, and add these different skills to try and catch different learners, different types of learners. It becomes, it's a toolkit, right? And so you keep getting better every semester, and you get feedback, and you tell them, hey, whether you like this class or not, tell me what you like, tell me what you didn't like, because every year I'm gonna decide what to keep, what not to keep, as I keep designing this course. So
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad your experience was a smooth one into the classroom. And Dr. Moody, have you had to teach since coming to the University of Alabama? I know it's been a pandemic, and most institutions went virtual. So what has that experience been like for you, if you've had to teach so far?
Yeah, I've taught. I taught 2 classes last semester. Believe it or not, this spring semester I did not teach, because you have a little bit of leverage when you're negotiating your contract for that first year. And I didn't get everything I wanted, but I was able to negotiate a 2-0 teaching load, meaning I teach 2 courses in the fall and 0 in the spring, so I could just focus on research. And that's what I've been doing this semester, or the semester that just ended. But I did teach in the fall. It's pandemic, so it was not the smoothest. We had a few different formats. What we did for the classes that I taught, which was sociology, intro to sociology, 2 different sections. We had a hybrid format, meaning that we had a certain amount of students who could be allowed in the classroom, and every student was assigned a specific day to come, 1 day out of the week to come to class, and the rest had to Zoom in. So I'm teaching folks in class while simultaneously trying to teach those who are watching in from Zoom. And that first week, especially the first day, I feel like I definitely fell flat on my face. And it just is what it is. I wasn't the only one, so I didn't feel too rejected. But it took a lot of courage to kind of keep coming back after that first week. But the good news is, I reached out. UAB had plenty of resources. The tech, the IT department, they're second to none out here. They really, did their best to make sure that they supported everyone, especially professors who had very little experience with Zoom and stuff like that, who were probably, very used to teaching a certain way and had to switch. So I would just say it was more of a gut check situation for me, where I had to, just get up after falling. And once I did that, I don't even think the students remember how rocky that first day was, because by week 3 we were rolling.
Yeah.
And it was great, and I got to know them a little bit better. They got to know me a little bit better. To Geoffrey's point, I just tried to think about who I was as a student in college, and I wasn't the most high achieving. So I felt like if I could teach to someone who was like me in college, then I could probably reach, the majority of the students. Probably not all, it doesn't always happen that way, but at least the majority would come away with what they needed to know from the course. And unless they lied in my evaluations, I think that happened. They were very pleased with the course, but the thing that probably touched me the most about teaching, and I know you didn't ask this, but I have to share it. I would say after that 3rd or 4th week, I started, very little by little, having students come up to me after class saying that, this was, one of their favorite classes, and, they're happy that we get to talk about, the topics that we're discussing and the references that I make, and the jokes and stuff like that. Cause I tend to be a little, lighthearted at times, just to keep people engaged. And, that kind of boosted my confidence. So when I was feeling like, man, how is this going? Am I doing a good job? I was getting positive reinforcement from the students. And that made a huge difference. And then, the Black students started coming up to me afterwards saying, hey, I'm so glad to have you as a professor. I got some emails. And, they were just saying, I don't have any other Black professors. And it's a breath of fresh air to be able to come in here or Zoom and have you as a professor. And that really stood out to me because it made me think about how I didn't always have that in the classroom either. And I went to an HBCU for undergrad, so I had it there, but after I left, I didn't have that. And I realized, man, it makes a difference, when the professor can speak your language a little bit and they seem a little bit more relatable to your culture and the things that someone might use for examples when trying to teach a lesson. So that really stood out to me last semester, and it made me want to come back this fall and teach more and make sure that I'm present in the space, being that I am a Black man, and there just aren't a lot of us in higher education, whether it be teaching or learning, unfortunately. So yeah, that stood out to me last semester, and I can't wait to to have more experiences like that moving forward.
So
Wow,
I gotta say, Myles, sorry to cut you off, Donaldson. Starting in the pandemic sounds like the hardest thing in the world, but it actually, you're talking about it opens up two things. It seems like you had the benefit of having no expectations on teaching prior. So it's not like you've been in a classroom, of course, but you're not feeling like, oh, I've been doing it this way so long, and now how do I transition to this? So that's beneficial. And then I'll tell you, from what I saw from the students in the spring of last year, that like when it happened, when the pandemic happened, the shutdown happened, that transition was awful. And so getting it in the fall, where actually people had the summer to know, okay, this is what it's going to be like. And I think students, to our benefit, still kept expectations low on how good this is going to be or how interactive. And so, yeah, God bless you for starting in the middle of a pandemic, but it sounds like it worked out.
Yeah, kudos to you for being able to handle that first semester, with grace and having great feedback from the students to reinforce what you may have been doing well, and also giving me that boost in confidence. So I'm happy to hear your experience went well. Before I transition a little bit, I want to get to the part about how you both got to where you are now. But I'm just curious to know, in your current department, Dr. Moody, what is the composition of faculty, and who is there you feel that you can connect with for support, and yeah, if there are also the Black faculty in the department?
Yeah, great question. And I'm going to answer this as honestly as I can. I'm not pandering or anything like that, but I really lucked out at UAB. I feel like I can reach out to any of my colleagues for support. And it's actually one of the reasons why I chose UAB. I mean, this was my top choice. It's not a secret to the people who I met before I came here. I really wanted to be here. And a big reason for that is because they just kind of give me the vibe of, what you see is what you get. They're very, about the work, and just supportive however they can be. Not a whole lot of drama in our department, or at least that I'm aware of. Same thing as far as what Geoffrey said, as far as the expectations. I would say that they're pretty clear cut, or at least for our department. You don't have to do a lot of guessing. But to answer your question about the composition, the reason why I led with that is because, it's mostly white. And then there's me, and then you have our department chair, Dr. Keith, who's amazing.
Keith, what's the last name? Oh, I mean, first name?
Verna Keith, Dr. Verna Keith.
Is he white or Black? I'm not sure.
The woman. She's Black. Yes.
Oh, okay. Black.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, she really is, a titan, you know, as far as the research that she does on discrimination in health. She's been doing this work since the 90s and even before. And she's just renowned in the discipline, but
Okay.
not just as a researcher, but also as a mentor, you know, as a leader. Her reputation in both of those things, I mean, they definitely, you know, were loud before I even, you know, got here. So that makes a difference to me. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that every department across the country has that, where they have a Black woman, you know, at the head, and um, it's a smooth ship. Let's just say that's not what I've heard, and I'll just leave that at that. But I think it makes a huge difference when you have support at the top, and when you have someone who values what you value in it, you know, in that position, and people are in line and they respect her or him or they, you know. And I think that those are the things that make the difference in you feeling supported and you feeling like you have what you need in order to be successful at this level. At least that's what I'm finding out so far. But yeah, I mean, it's just me and Dr. Keith. And
Okay.
we're hoping to maybe change that. I know it's no secret. I was definitely brought in, you know, to kind of help change that. Of course, I was qualified, right? But, you know, they definitely wanted to make sure that those efforts of increasing diversity, you know, were followed through and, you know, met with, you know, success. It's not always, you know, that you have a successful faculty candidate search that turns out that way, but
Mhm.
it worked out for me. It worked out for us. And, you know, hopefully moving forward, we can, you know, we can add some more folks to the department.
Well, that's beautiful to hear. You have the support at in the department, regardless of the fact that you don't only the only Black male, and then you have the Black female chair. But as long as you have the support, you feel like you need to succeed. I'm happy to hear that. I'm going to ask one more question about UAB, and then after that, I'll transition to the your experience before. But what do you think helped you to become to help you make it into the faculty position straight out of the PhD program successfully? And then I'll also ask Dr. Silvera, did you also transition from the PhD into a faculty or not? And if so, what do you think helped you to stand out? Because as you both know, not every student who finishes a PhD is able to transition into a faculty position, regardless, sometimes even if it's research intensive or teaching. So what do you think helped you to stand out, given that these are national searches, they're receiving applications from everyone, and you were offered the position straight out of your PhD program. And perhaps you could talk about your PhD program. Where did you go? What helped you to be where you are now?
Sure, sure. I'll add one last thing and then I'll answer those questions. We also have a new dean who came in when I came in, Dean Thomas, who's also a Black woman.
Okay.
And of course, we need Black folks, not just in top positions, right? We need them, everywhere, right? We need to be everywhere. But it does make a difference, especially when they are wonderful, at what they do, and her presence has been great so far. She's really got a lot of people, excited and believing in her, in her leadership as well. So that type of stuff does make a difference. I think we're going to have more diversity in the next few years at each level. But anyway, moving on. So about the PhD program, and I love talking about this. I'm not sure who the audience is going to be exactly, whether it's folks looking into PhD programs or folks coming out of PhD programs. But I'm always happy to talk about this. So I went to the University of Kentucky for my PhD. And it's no secret that Kentucky is one of the whitest states in the country. And Lexington, Kentucky, not Louisville, Lexington is where UK is at. And there was just, it's not what I was used to diversity wise. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, grew up in a pretty diverse area. I went to Morehouse College for undergrad. That's a liberal arts college, historically Black college. And it's in Atlanta, which is one of the, Blackest cities in the country. And then after that, I went to Memphis for my master's, which is also, it's a Black town. But I would say the transition from my master's program to the PhD program at UK was pretty rough, as far as socially. I was the only Black person in my department. Well, actually, we did have an Afro-Dominican professor in our department, but given that she's actually from, there, DR and everything, culturally, we probably just didn't have a whole lot to talk about, and that's fine. Everyone in the diaspora is not going to be the same, but I didn't have that, Black American mentor right there in my department, nor did I have a peer. And that can leave you feeling very, very isolated. And then on top of that, and it's no secret, I tell this story, often, and it's no slight to UK. I mean, we have a great relationship, but I was also the only one in my cohort who was admitted without funding. So you add all of those layers. I found funding after that. Shout out to the Southern Regional Education Board Doctoral Scholars Program, SREB. They're a wonderful fellowship. If anyone's interested, check them out. But all those layers had me thinking, am I supposed to be here? I felt very isolated. So I'm the type of person where I can go into, the jungle and I'll be okay. You leave me in the wild, I'll be fine. But at the same time, it did take a toll, on my mental health a little bit. So I don't want to scare anyone, but that is a reality. You obviously want to be cognizant of your wellness and your well-being. So that wasn't easy. But what it forced me to do was it forced me to reach out to others, across the campus. So other PhD students, who were Black and who were like me, whether they were in the psychology department or social work, anthropology. And I was able to connect with them, share some experiences. We got some research done. So there are papers that I'm on with them, still to this day.
Great.
Yep, we're still publishing. So I think that one, it forced me to get outside of my comfort zone of that department, which as sociologists, we really need to do a better job of. And it put me in this very interdisciplinary track, to where now, even though I'm a sociologist, I could do work with folks in public health and and psychology, and I'm doing it now, and I love it. It's great. College of Medicine. Shout out to all of the colleges of medicine. They always have a lot of great funding over there. Um, but no, in all seriousness, what made my experience as a PhD student successful is my mentors. I had phenomenal mentors, even though they weren't the demographic that I was used to. Right, they were both white. Both of my co-chairs in my department were two white women. They were phenomenal as mentors, and I say that all the time. Dr. Carrie Ozer, she's a huge force at UK. She's associate chair of the department, but also associate director of the Center for Health Equity Transformation, CHET, as we like to call it at UK, which we helped to found. I'm really proud of that. But she always made sure that I had a research assistantship. She made sure that I had opportunities with folks across campus. That is invaluable. If you have that in a mentor, it's going to change your experience. And then Dr. Robin Brown, she made sure that I knew who Dr. Keith was, because Dr. Keith mentored, Dr. Keith mentored Dr. Brown, Robin. And when you have folks who are going to speak on your behalf and advocate for you when you're not around, that's a game changer. So I owe everything to those women, as well as Dr. Courtney Thomas Tobin, who started out at UK. She's a Black woman, and a Black researcher. She started out at UK when I first got there, but ended up getting a position at UCLA. I'm not telling everybody's business, but it's public information. And she's doing well there now in the public health department, but she kept me as a mentee. You can't ask for, better, mentorship than that, for someone to go all the way across the country and still support you and make sure that they're on your committee, make sure that y'all are doing papers together. That made my experience. I'm sharing all this to say that while I didn't have what would look like a very supportive or diverse experience, if you can find it, if it's there, try to cultivate it, yourself, because it truly does make a difference. Even though I hadn't seen Courtney in person in 3 or 4 years, we still had weekly meetings. We still talked on the phone. We still emailed each other, updates and stuff like that. So I still had her guidance and I still had her leadership. And then Dr. Danielle Stevens-Watkins in the psychology department, another Black woman who was also on my committee, just a phenomenal leader. She allowed me to be a part of her lab, and this is a lab full of, minority students, Black students. And it put me in a space where even away from my department, I still had community. So I'm bringing all this up, like I said, to say, if it's not there, you might still be able to create it. You might still be able to find it, but you're going to have to do some things, to make it happen. And all of those things definitely contributed to my success, I think.
Perfect. And just to be a little bit more specific, what were your products, right? By the time you were applying for the position, did you have this number of publications because of the collaborations you were able to establish, maybe grants or something else, besides the mentors connection, like just to have metrics, in that case?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you want me to toot my own horn.
No, just for the people want to know, what are the metrics? Because not everyone can go from a PhD program into a tenure track assistant professor at a top institution. So spill the beans.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. I mean, many people would say I was pretty successful at that level. By the time I applied for this job, I had 7 publications as a graduate student, which just really isn't that common for sociology. So people looked at that and, it caught a lot of attention, 3 first author publications. And there were a bunch of other goals that I met that I never thought, I would meet, because I wasn't that, highly gifted or whatever you want to call it in college, just because I didn't take it seriously. I wasn't mature enough. Not that I wasn't smart. But for example, I got a scholarship to go to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for ICPSR. It's just this stats, program for folks who are interested in doing research, using quantitative methods, so numbers. And I never thought that I would, make that short list of sociologists in the country. I think it's like 10 or less. If anyone's truly interested, you can Google it or go to the website and see the list of winners every year. It's a very short list, and I was on that list back in 2019. I also won another short list national fellowship, the ASA, American Sociological Association Minority Fellowship Award. Only 5 people got it. And I was the only guy who got it. There are a few things, and it's weird for me to talk about, my own stuff, but my website, mylesdmoody.com, if you want to look at those things. But let's just say I'm decorated a little bit at that level, and very, very proud of it. I have my mentors to thank for that. They wrote very, very strong letters of recommendation, including the mentors before my PhD program. So Drs. Andrea Robinson and Dr. Anna Muller from the University of Memphis. I kept in contact with them. They're both heavyweights at Georgetown and Indiana right now doing their thing. I kept in contact with them. So because I had great relationships with great mentors, I was able to, to leverage, those relationships into, where I am now.
Perfect. And just last question, how many years were in your program?
Well, I did 2 years at the University of Memphis for my master's, and I like to count those 2 years. And then I did 5 years in my PhD program at UK. So a total of 7 years, which does not sound fun, but I recommend all 7. I do.
Great, because I'm sure it helped you to build a foundation to then, hit the ground running and get 7 publications after
It's
finishing your
necessary.
PhD. You know,
Yes.
that's wonderful. I had 2 papers when I finished my PhD, so I know it makes a difference. So now let's turn to you, Dr. Silvera. What helped you, you know, with the transitioning from the PhD program to where you went after, and a little bit, if you can share.
So I think Myles covered a lot of ground in his experience, and I think there's a lot of overlap. So I had a little bit of an odd experience at Penn State, not because of Penn State, not because of Pennsylvania even, but Donaldson and I were both at Penn State at the same time in different departments. There's one other Black male that was part of our friend group, Byron Gaston, who actually went to my high school, but I didn't know him in high school. He was there with my sister was there. But the things that, like the high level things that I want to bring up are that Myles has already laid out: networking, mentorship, and be excellent, right? It's not who you know, it's who knows you, right? So leveraging those 3 things together to sort of lay a groundwork for you in your career. You know, the networking helps you identify mentors. The mentors help you identify what it means to be excellent, right? And so, and they help you to have 7 publications when you're coming out, 2 publications. I had 5 when I came out. My experience, though, as a student was a little bit odd for personal reasons. So I was getting engaged and getting married in the middle of my doctorate. And so I had 2 years of coursework up at Penn State, and then I moved to North Carolina to be with my now wife, and finished remotely. My funding allowed for that because I was like TAing remotely. When I was remote, that was the most difficult part of my doctoral process, because it was right as I was about to propose my dissertation, and I had a team of people that promised to keep working with me, but I think everybody thought I was just going to move on and like go be married and get a job and not graduate. But I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm going to defend in a year, you know, like, and propose. And I reached out to someone who I saw in an email thread was at Greensboro, North Carolina, as part of a conference. So going back to that being excellent. So I had won awards at conferences, and I was being awarded a scholarship in this conference. And I saw in the email Greensboro, North Carolina. And so I just reached out and I said, hey, we have some common research interests. We're part of the same conference. Would you like to meet, get a cup of coffee or something? And that person, actually, his name is Eric Ford. He's actually at UAB now in the School of Public Health. And we're not in the same department, but he has been a mentor from that day forward. My dissertation chair, still a mentor. So both of them are white males, I guess technically, not technically they are. But they saw talent, and they saw a drive and an ambition to like be excellent. And they dug into that, and they invested in me and helping me develop skills. Eric Ford and I think have 7 or 8 papers now together. My dissertation advisor, we have about that many papers that we're working on. And so those are what we'll call mentors. One thing that Myles brought up that I just want to give it a label, the aunties. I'm going to name some names here that Donaldson knows as well. Dr. Rhonda Ballou, who's now at St. Louis University, was in my department. And the first day I was on campus, she said, we need to have a meeting. She said, I don't know what your research interests are. If you want to work on any of these projects that I'm doing, feel free. If they don't align with your interest, my door is always open. That was one of maybe 5 conversations we ever had, but just knowing that resource was right there in my department. She's now a chair at St. Louis University. Joyce Hopkins King, who is now retired. I don't know if she was an academic or if she was staff, but she was in your department, Donaldson, so you might know. But she hosted a monthly luncheon that she just said, all the Black graduate students just come, sit, breathe, you know, take off your mask sort of thing before mask sort of thing, and just be in this space, socialize. And so like, that's actually how Donaldson and I met, I think was one of JHK's things. Yeah. And so, yeah, shout out to the aunties who are just, I think they're everywhere in the world, and you got to find them, and they always want to take care of you and support you. And specifically to Dr. Blue, she will hold you to the fire on that being excellent. And that is your task.
And she's a chair now, actually, at St. Louis University, just to
she is.
Give her
Okay, so that was my experience at Penn State. The UAB, go back to talking about the composition of my department, because I think it also gets on this. It's a very diverse department. In this, but I mean that globally, right? So there's lots of global representation. It's primarily white, but at the same time, it's probably majority female. But there are people from Turkey and India, Jamaica,
Okay.
US, Black Americans. So in my department right now, I think I'm the only Black male. There was a young Black male when I was applying. He's since left to another university for for personal reasons, or for his own reasons. I don't know. But there's a young Black female. There's a senior Black female. The chair is a white woman. Frankly, compared to other academic departments, we're probably short on white men, to be honest. Just like compared to other departments. UAB in general, and this might turn out to be a commercial for UAB, immediately feels different in terms of diversity and inclusion. Like it is of primary interest, both for the students, for the city, and maybe this is part of it. Maybe Birmingham's history is part of this. In fact, I'm sure it is. And for faculty, they just really want everybody to make sure that they feel included, that we all belong here. This is a place for higher learning. This is a place for critical thinking. And so like all voices are really needed all voices need to feel celebrated. The people that are in my department now, 3 of them taught me in my master's at Florida. When I went to Penn State, 2 of the students ahead of me had gone through the master's program or one of the affiliated master's programs when I was at Florida. And so the networks don't stop feeding you back, right? So people that taught me my master's were now attending the same conferences, were presenting there in the same presentations. Oh, I'm so glad you went back and got your PhD. When you were in your master's, we just knew you were going to be a PhD student. Which my MHA was it's like a professionally based degree, but I just always thought I would ask questions like a PhD. And so they targeted, they stayed in contact. We stayed in contact. I will say my mentor, Eric Ford, who's in the School of Public Health here at UAB, he says mentorship does not go downward, right? If you want to be mentored, you have to ask for that. You have to sort of set expectations for that, because they're not going to go seeking you out. And so I always hold on to that. If you have an interest in something, or if you think knowing someone can teach you something or anything, reach out to that person. I recommend that to everybody, and keep in contact, which Myles already kind of pointed to. As far as the transition from going straight from my PhD into a teaching position, so I had a young family, so part of that was necessary. My research interests weren't really grant friendly. So the way I always frame it, the U.S. government is not yet interested in who is running hospitals, right? They're not interested in solving that problem. If it's a problem, I don't know if it's a problem, but they're not really interested in it. And so my research interests didn't really speak to any sort of grant funded position. So postdocs were kind of out. There were opportunities to sort of gain those skills, but I didn't see a way forward with what I was interested in. And so I went to Auburn, which is more of a balanced, it's hard money, teaching a 2-3, a 2-2, and then a 2-3. And so I think that was part of it. But all of what Myles said, be excellent, be winning things at awards, at conferences, national conferences, local conferences, whatever, just building a portfolio that people can say, okay, this person can do the work, right? Because more important than anything is like I don't know if it was before we started recording, but people hiring you want you to succeed. And so you need some evidence of success first, right? And so, they're not trying to take a wild shot. It costs over $100,000 to hire one tenure-track person, right? That year. And then whatever the salary is moving forward. And so there's a lot of investment in making sure that you succeed. And so they definitely want to make sure that you can do that.
Thank you for sharing. A lot of great tips, for maybe potential PhD students who are listening, or master's students, the importance of reaching out, maintaining those networks, and also being excellent. I think both of you said that, being as excellent as you can be, making sure you deliver what you are expected to deliver, asking for help if needed, right? Because as a PhD student, I remember, it's not everything you're going to know, but making sure you find help, maybe from a mentor, from a peer, regardless of the composition of the department, because, being excellent, I think, is not something that happens overnight. It's something you work on over and over until you feel like you have the hang of things, and you get that first paper, the second, and then the third, and more. You just continue to produce, to remain excellent. One paper by itself is not going to be enough, right? So you have to, have that consistency. So thank you very much for sharing those tips. For the last, segment of this session, I would just like to, open it up to hearing about, your journey before your master's, before your undergrad. Where were you in this world, or in this life, and what inspired you at some point along the way to decide that a PhD is what you wanted to pursue, and you were going to stick with it. But let's hear, from Dr. Moody. You say you're from St. Louis. Let me hear a little bit about, your time in St. Louis as a young man, as a boy, teenager, before going to Morehouse.
Yeah, sure. Great question. So yeah, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. If you're not familiar, you can look up University City. I think it's U City for short. But it's a part of St. Louis County. And reason why I always bring up U City is because that's the high school that Nelly and Murphy Lee and all the lunatics went to. So just as a frame of reference for people who don't know anything about St. Louis, that's the area that I'm from. And as a child, I would just say I didn't know I had what we like to call a sociological imagination, but I knew that with residential segregation being so, obvious there, like it is in Birmingham, like it is in so many different cities, even as a child, I was able to recognize, if we go this way in the city, past Delmar Boulevard, there's, on the north side, there's going to be mostly Black folks. That's where all my family live. I mean, technically we were on the north side of Delmar too, but we were really close to it. That's where the schools aren't, the best, that's where the hood is. That's where, we'll see a lot of, neighborhoods that just aren't taken care of, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if we go the opposite direction, the skin color is different over there. It's white folks. The restaurants and all that stuff seems a lot nicer. That's where the good schools are, et cetera, et cetera. And I knew that as a kid, and I said to myself, how could this be? And as I got older, I just became a lot more interested in social inequality. Not knowing what a sociologist was, not knowing that I wanted to go to grad school or any of that stuff. I just was always curious about it. So it stayed at the forefront of my mind, no matter what my interests were at that time. But when I got to college, and I said this a little earlier, I wasn't the most mature a college student, even coming out of high school. I graduated with a 2.7. It's not something that I'm ashamed of. I tell people all the time, because I mean, hey, I graduated, PhD, program, with like a 3.9. So I feel pretty good about that. But it wasn't because I was dumb. I just didn't value, education the way I should have, probably at that level. And I think it's just a maturity thing, right? Being able to see the work that you do in class and outside of class as a means to an end. And that didn't hit me until I was like 20, 21. And I realized at Morehouse, I was like, oh man, it looks like I'm going to graduate on time. Did not expect to, right? And especially at Morehouse, it's just uncommon. They'll find all types of, reasons for holding you back that 5th year. But when it looked like I was going to graduate on time, that's when I started asking myself the questions of, man, what am I going to do next? And so school kind of became an option out of necessity initially. And I started going into, you know, the office of my mentor there, you know, Dr. Bryant, and, you know, just started asking questions. Hey, you know, do you think I could go to grad school? And I had a 2.9 GPA at the time. Again, was not very cognizant about, you know, what I needed to do at that age in order to be successful in life. But I started asking questions, and that turned it all around. And he guided me through the process. He said, you know, might be good to do a master's program instead of PhD right out the gate. So that's what got me into the University of Memphis, because that was a terminal master's program. And what that means is that there's no PhD level of, you know, of students there or program there. It's just all master's program, all master's students. And then, you know, you graduate and you're done. Personally, I needed that, you know, as a buffer. I needed, you know, that those 2 years to kind of get acclimated to higher education, I guess, you know, because I kind of played in college and I needed to, you know, get serious. So that helped acclimate me to what to expect moving forward. And for those who maybe won't have that buffer, I would say, you know, starting college if you can, asking questions about, you know, what grad school is like, what the expectations are. It's good to know that if you know, don't get a B or better, that, you know, you might fail. So you want to know that before you get there. Just things like that, you know, mentors and mentee and that relationship, what that should look like. Because a lot of us just didn't get that. We weren't seeking it, you know, until it was necessary. So that's kind of like my journey, I would say, up to the PhD program. I realized that I always had an interest in social inequality, going back to my first example of me as a kid, but I didn't know what it was. You know, I didn't know that you could become a sociologist and do research until it was time for me to go to grad school. Then once I got there, I locked in and realized, oh, okay, I'm interested in this. I seem to be doing okay, having some success. Let me, you know, really apply myself here. And that's when, you know, the papers started coming out. That's when I started saying, hey, do you think I could get a scholarship to go to Michigan? Or do you think I could get this research assistantship? And I was really applying myself. And kind of a theme that we've been seeing throughout this conversation is, if you have good mentors and they see you going for it, they're going to make sure that you're successful. All you got to do is do your part and be excellent. So once I locked in, as I like to say, you know, and started taking things more seriously, that's when the success came. And I realized, oh, this is what my potential is, you know. But yeah, my point is that I didn't actually know until I was, you know, almost a grown man. And I think that, you know, this initiative, you know, is going to hopefully be a step in the right direction for people like myself, who had I known about sociology and getting a PhD at a much younger age, I might have hit the ground running, you know, even in high school. You know, I might have said, hey, this is something that I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do just because I hadn't seen it. You know, I hadn't seen it in person. I didn't know that it was a thing in St. Louis. You don't have a whole bunch of Black PhDs, let alone Black men PhDs running around. So I didn't realize that until I got to Morehouse. And then it started to kind of click and make sense on my way out the door. So that's my story. Sometimes I do wonder what things would have been like had I been exposed earlier, you know, and would I be even more successful? You know, again, not to toot my own horn, but, you know, I think I started out pretty late compared to a lot of my peers who were already doing research in undergrad. You know, I showed up late to the party, and, you know, thank God I was able to still be successful. But, you know, I think about how hard it was for me to kind of get over that learning curve. And, you know, if I would have started earlier, who knows, I might not have had such a difficult time. But either way, I persevered, as we all are capable of doing. And, you know,
And here
here
you
I am.
are,
Here I am. Yeah.
you know, an assistant professor on the
Yeah.
tenure track straight out of the PhD. So I would like to think for the time you took, you know, figuring it out in more at Morehouse, so toward the end, and taking the time for the masters, you've made up for that by not having to go to do a postdoc after the PhD and figuring more about, how to eventually end up on the tenure track. So I'm very happy to hear of your story of how you were able to, once it made sense, once you had that light bulb moment, you were able to, stick to it and find the people to help you get to where you are now. And I'm sure, I'm hoping, someone out there will hear this story and it will, resonate with them and let them know to keep going. And it's not too late, it's not too
even
late.
if you don't have the best grades. I mean, that's not something that, like I said, I'm not super proud that I was underachieving. I was definitely underachieving. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't look at requirements and say, oh, I'll never be able to make it, so let me not apply. No, I still applied and I gave it my best. And once I got to, the next level, I said, okay, what do I need to do to be successful to make it to the next level and then the next level? And then I kept going that way. So don't feel like you have to, be able to see the entire, roadmap very clearly right up front. Oftentimes you won't be able to see it clearly up front, but just do what you need to do to get to the next level, because it's possible.
If I can just chime in on that. I think that's a great point. There's a tendency, and I think we probably pick it up in high school, to look at numbers and get discouraged, right? That's not me. Those aren't my SAT scores. Those aren't my GRE scores or whatever the relevant course is. But even when we know, and a lot of times we don't even know this, the average of a place, that average means that there are people that are well under that number. What they're looking for in admissions is not your profile in terms of numbers, at least at the best places. They're looking for whether or not you're remarkable, right? So if your numbers aren't remarkable, you should be remarkable in some other way, right? You should be, oh, this is my story and this is why this is important to me, or this is the outside of school experience that I have, some extracurricular activity or work or job or whatever that speaks directly to this experience, or to this program, and here's what I want to do with it moving forward, right? And why I think it's valuable to get it. I think that's something everybody needs to hear.
So let's say how you've been remarkable in your journey and where you were. If you've always been remarkable, or did you get to a point where you felt like
since birth, baby? No, I'm just kidding.
Since birth.
No, I'm completely joking. I'm from Miami originally. And so actually, I just want to comment, Myles, the first real suburb I ever saw was flying into St. Louis. And I was like, oh, we're getting ready to land, because all of South Florida's density, right? Like there's no real suburbs, but flying into St. Louis, I saw a little pocket of homes and then a road that like probably an hour-long road. And I was like, oh, this is what a suburb is. And so I just had never seen anything.
There are some suburbs in St. Louis.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about racial segregation. So Miami, if you're not familiar, is very dense, but it's similar to New York, where you have like pockets that are certain populations. And so I'm of Jamaican descent. Where we lived, there were a lot of Jamaicans, a lot of Haitians. I went to school in a part that was primarily Cuban. And so anyway, it was a very, there's actually a political science scholar that's broken up America into like 13 countries, I think 11 or 13 countries. And South Florida is all considered part of Latin America. And it fits. I mean, frankly, it fits. Like there's just there's a melting pot of cultures. And like my wife went to high school with me and she's Nicaraguan. And so like, you don't see Jamaicans and Nicaraguans meeting in a lot of different places outside of Latin America, right? New York, Miami, maybe LA. Anyway, so when I was getting ready to go to school, I was always a academic achiever all through school, up through high school. And what that meant for me when I finally got to college, to be frank, I tested well. My GPA was always good because of AP courses and honors courses or whatever. But what that meant for me when I got to college is I had zero work ethic, like none. Because I was the kid that could sit in the class. If the teacher said it, I'll remember it for the class. And so when I got to college and everything was very much work-based, especially like I wanted to be a doctor, a physician. So a lot of it was like memorization and analysis and analysis and all that. And I would pass my classes okay, but I was not dutiful as an undergraduate. And I graduated with a similar GPA, so like a 3.2 or something. All my friends had little asterisks behind their names at graduation, and then it was just my name, right? Like everybody with honors, with magna cum. I wasn't quite in the thank the Lordy, but I was close, right? So, but now I'm getting ready to apply to medical schools with a B average and so-so scores. And frankly, I didn't want to be a physician. Since I was a kid, I wanted to be a brain surgeon. I said it once, the whole family went, "Oh, that's my baby. He's a brain surgeon." And that was it, right? So I went to summer camps about it. I went to all this stuff, like very focused on being a brain surgeon. And after I graduated, I shadowed a brain surgeon at UF. And I hated his life. I hated it. And that's if there was anything that I could go back and do differently, I would have shadowed that person freshman year. Because I don't think it was just him. I think it wasn't his personality, it was his life. Like, he was doing the same surgery 15 times a week. And I was like, this is not what it's like on TV. It's not what Ben Carson said in the book, right? He's doing all these like amazing surgeries. Sorry, I had to mention Ben Carson. It was a good book. Anyway, he's turned out to be a weird person, but his book was good. All right. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to be a brain surgeon. Maybe I want to be a physician otherwise. And I realized, no, I kind of don't. I was really only dedicated to this one idea. And so when I started to broaden thinking about what to do, and I thank God that I wasn't in med school having this revelation, because I could have been, right? Like there were schools that I didn't want to go to, but there were good schools and they're fine. They would have made me a physician. But if I was having that revelation while in med school, that would have been a $150,000, $300,000 like revelation. And so I looked around and there was the MHA, and then this thing, MPH, which I'd heard of and I had friends in the program, Master in Public Health. Then there was this Master's in Health Administration, which I had never heard of. You mean they teach people how to run hospitals? Like, I had wanted to be a physician. I was always interested in healthcare. My parents are small business owners. I was always interested in business. Like, we were starting businesses in college, part of our distraction and not being like focused scholars. I was selling t-shirts. I was, when my brother was little, we'd sell those little bracelets, right? Like, so I was always interested in being an entrepreneur, always interested in healthcare. And now there's this degree that does both. Why didn't somebody tell me sooner? And then I start getting in there and I'm learning about hospitals and all the different healthcare organizations that there are. I'm in the strategic management course. Shout out to Mona Alameen, who's at Suffolk University now. And I'm like, this is really interesting. And so it's sort of the same revelation you were having, Myles, as a child, about like where hospitals are matter and who they serve matters. And like, there's all these contexts of social influence determining like healthcare outcomes. This is really interesting. And so I'm asking questions like that, and they're giving me, are you sure you want to finish this MHA? Because you could start the PhD program now. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna go run a hospital. That's what I'm gonna do. Like, you're training me to be a hospital CEO. I'm gonna go be a hospital CEO. And then I graduate. Let me get the dates right. I graduate in 2010. Is that right? Yeah, I graduated in 2010, and the bubble bursts, right? There's no jobs. There's two things actually happening in healthcare. There's the recession, and there's a policy called high tech, which is like the EHR policy. So all hiring across healthcare freezes completely. Like, it's done. So I go and move in on my girlfriend's couch, who's now my wife. And, I'm working at Sears, just trying to figure out, she's wanting to go back to get a PhD. And I'm like, oh, let me just help you study for your test. And then I end up taking the test, the GRE again. Oh, while I was in UF, I was part of the McNair Scholars Program, which, if there is one on your campus or anything like it, highly recommend it. There was GRE prep as part of it. It was geared for people who knew they were going to graduate school. I was like, yeah, I'm going to graduate school, but I always knew I was going to medical school in my head. But having gone through that program, I was so prepared for graduate school admissions, which were different than medical school admissions. And so, definitely the McNair Scholars Program was a great benefit. And I only joined it because they were like, we'll give you money to stick around for the summer. I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna be here anyway. And to harp on again something Myles said about getting locked in. that program for me at UF, which is a huge institution. So we had 150,000 students at the time I was there.
Wow.
Every freshman year is 50,000 students. So classrooms, 300, 400 students. McNair Scholars was 18 students. And it was the first time that I had, first of all, everybody in the room looked like me, was either Black or brown or first generation. Teacher at the front. And it was, once the classroom got smaller, that's when I got locked in. So like when it was the auditoriums and they, our advisors were all telling us, sit at the front so you can make eye contact with the professor. You want to make sure and I was ignoring all of that. Like, I'm going to get to class on time. I'm going to do the snake game on my cell phone in the back and see how far I can get it and do anything, but I'll be in the class. I'm going to get the attendance point. That's about as much as you get from me. Excuse me. But once I was in a McNair classroom, by that I mean like a small classroom, I was really locked in. I was able to learn. And then grad school looked like that for me too. So my master's program, 25 students max, teacher at the front, you're all a cohort. So you're reinforcing what you're learning as you go through. And so all of that was hugely beneficial to me. And then when I went for my PhD, it was as part of a funding from Penn State. And they had I don't know what Penn State's deal is, but there were a lot of Black people there while we were there across different programs, mostly recruited out of HBCUs, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely mostly from the South. And so it was a little, like there were cookouts, and that's where I learned how to do the line dance. I forgot what it's called. When you step on party lines, I can't remember what they're called. Do you remember, Donaldson? I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I do. I do remember the cookouts. I think it was the Black Graduate Student Association that used to put it together.
Somebody's gonna get me for not remembering what those are
I'm
called.
gonna just ask you, can you talk a little bit about the MHA transition to the PhD? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, so the MHA,
because you said you were helping your wife, back, was your girlfriend, studying for her own, maybe.
Yeah, this is actually a contentious point in my house. So I was not the one that was going for the PhD. I was not the one that was interested. My wife was always interested in PhD, and she has not yet gotten hers. And so there's salt on that. But I took the test at the same time she took it, and I did very well.
The
and
GRE.
Because of that, on the GRE.
Okay.
And part of that was familiarity with the test, and part of that was the preparations that we were going through. But it was already in the back of my mind to get a PhD. Not that I'm defending it, but it was already in the back of my mind. What I would tell my professors when I was doing my MHA was, well, I'm going to go work for a couple of years and then I'll come back for the PhD. Well, those couple of years turned out to not be. I think within 9 months, I was back in a program for the PhD because there just were no jobs to go to. And I think this is true of all scholars, but as a naturally curious person, being in a classroom just always felt right to me. Like sitting and learning just always felt like where I needed to be at that time. I'm getting the most useful thing. And I know other people have different experiences of classrooms, but like, as soon as I got back to campus, I was like, oh, this is great. This is great. And then I was up in Penn State during all the scandal time. It was a wild time. But yeah.
That's your story, man. Wow. One thing I kept thinking about as you were talking, especially when you said you were not really you were not as dutiful as you needed to be, and you could pass your classes and everything, but it just reminded me of how smooth you were when you were at Penn State. You always glided around, and you were not really too stressed, and nice little bag.
I think that goes with what Myles. I forgot about my bag. I think that goes with what Myles is saying. If you're locked in, for one thing, there's no reason to stress. But the other thing is, not everyone. So like we have common friends who went straight from undergrad to the PhD. And so it might have been imposter syndrome, it might have been something else, but they were very concerned about earning their spot in the class. Having gone through already a master's program, knowing that grades don't really matter, right? It's what you learn, right? It's what you know. That took a lot of stress off. it's a different thing when you, and I think this is part of that locked in that you talked about, Myles. And if I'm getting it wrong, or you can let me know, but like knowing that the knowledge is critical changes the relationship to the grades. I don't care about grades. I'll be honest. I cared exactly one quarter about grades, and it was because I never had straight A's in all of my higher ed. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. This last time I'm going to do it. See what it takes, right? Yeah. But other than that, it was the knowledge is what I need. Like what is critical knowledge and how can I keep it, gain it, whatever. But me and grades never got along because I was just like, this is not speaking to who I am as a person, right? It's not a value. It's some arbitrary, did I fill this out, properly thing. And what's important is getting the knowledge.
Getting the knowledge, and you both have gotten the knowledge through your different journeys and different fields, and now you are, sharing that knowledge with students at the same universities in different departments. And I'm just excited that we're able to have both of you for our first BMPRC initiative conversation, really about, being a Black male professor, Black male PhD student, and so forth and so on. So just before I go, if you have one word you would like to share, before we go, or any last minute thoughts.
Sorry, I promise this will be my last word. I have never experienced this. 3 Black men in the room, in a Zoom room or in a real room, just knowing we're all professors, knowing we're all owning our respective professions. And it feels good, man. It feels good. So thank you for starting this. This is it is an honor and a privilege to be a part of this. And I'm so excited to see where it goes and grows to.
That warmed my heart, man. That warmed my heart because as I mentioned in the beginning, I know we are out there somewhere, but coming together, sharing our stories, connecting with each other, and inspiring younger, Black men, offering ourselves as mentors for these younger Black men. I'm sure both of you might not have a problem if anyone wants to reach out to you and ask questions about the journey. So, but thank you for those words, man, because this is the reason I'm interested in this initiative and hoping that we can warm each other up as we go through this journey. So, Dr. Moody, it's over to you. What is your last thought and word before we wrap up?
Yeah, and I totally echo that sentiment. I mean, this is like, it's always wonderful when you can be around folks, from your experience. So thank you for, beginning this initiative. But I guess, my last word would just simply be, go for it until you can't, anymore. Try until, your path is, has ended, because you just never know. And, especially if you end up taking it seriously, as we've been saying this entire time, and, really locking in and doing your best, you'd be surprised, what can come of that. I think I'm a living witness. We're all living witnesses of that. So just, continue to strive, and then you can put yourself in a position that we're in, where we can lift as we climb. Because it's important, and we all need it, and people did it for us, so we want to pay it forward, and hopefully whoever's watching this will be able to pay it forward to someone else who comes after them.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better, man. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys again at some point in the future.
Yeah.